Welcome to another video. Today it's cold in Port Elizabeth. We've been struggling to get rain, but we're having some good rains lately, and I'm so happy about that. But anyway, today we're going to talk about em- employment agencies. That is what everybody knows them to be. Most people nowadays are engaging in labor broking, where if you don't have a job, you find somebody that you know that works at the company, and he said the only way I got into this company was I used an agency. So if you want to get a job, you need to use an agency. So most of us who don't have a job, we try to get into a place, and we take our CV to a place, and then we find out that in order for to get into this company, you used to have to work for this employment agency called perhaps King Recruitment. I know there's quite a lot here in the area where I am, and so there's basically four things that you need to know when you start working for an employment agency. Um, the legal term is called the Temporary Employment Services, and that is enshrined in the Labor Relations Act, as well as the basic conditions of employment at the BCA. You'll find it in there. They make reference to TES, Temporary Employment Services. Another name you can use is a labor broker. So if you're an unemployed person, you're looking for a job, what do you do? The first thing you have to go to an employment agency, and they're the ones that's going to be finding a job for you, even if it's for a temporary a time period, and you need to be able to take your CV in, and if you can do maybe a job at maybe a dairy company where you're going to pack milk, as an example, that is going to be for maybe a month, or somebody's on maternity leave, or whatever the case may be. They place you there for a while, and then you leave. But when you start to work there, you need to know what your rights are in terms of the temporary employment services. Let's use the legal term, temporary employment services. But obviously, I explained in terms of what that means. So now there's basically four steps that you need to, not four steps, there's four things that you need to know to, when you start working there, what are your rights when it comes to a temporary employment services. Because once you start working, automatically there's a triangular relationship between you as an employee versus your agency you're working for and the client that they place you at. So let's say your car, so let's say your temporary employment services or labor broker that you're working for is called Kelly. That's the name of the agency is called Kelly. I'm just making an example of a couple of ones that I know. Now, and your name is John. John works for Kelly, but he is placed at a dairy company. Um, let's call it, maybe, yeah, we know common ones we know is Parmalat. You're going to work at that dairy company. So automatically now there's a triangle relationship. So the first thing that you need to know is that once you start working for them, there must be a contract in place in writing. They can't just send you there and just help out there, and tomorrow you go back home and then you get your money. This thing where people have this notion where you help out at the place, there's no such thing as helping out when you work at the company. You enter into a relationship between yourself and your employer, and your conditions of employment are stipulated in the contract. And the legal term for contract is written particulars of employment in terms of Section 29 of the basic conditions of employment. Each person must enter into a contract, whether you work there for 1 week or whether you work there for 1 month or 1 year, it doesn't matter. That's the first thing that needs to happen. So you automatically you should be able to know that there's no such thing as helping out. Now, the second thing that is very important that you need to remember is that if there's a dispute that arises out of this relationship, even if it's of the making of the client, let's say this client maybe is treating you badly, or there is a dispute about something, you can't lodge a dispute against the client. The first thing you need to know is that the dispute must be referred to. Let's say you go to the CCMA for a dispute. That must be against the agent, because remember, the agent is the one that's paying you. So if you have a dispute, go to the CCMA or to the Labor Department and open up a case against the company that you're working for, which is the agent. And then that is where the starting point is where you need to be able to lodge that dispute, and the client will be entered into the case later, perhaps, if need be, because people are actually being exploited out there. It's easy for you to be able to just be temporarily used and discard of later, because the problem is that the client does not want to take responsibility for this employee. So they pay an external person for you to be able to do a service for them and dispose of you and leave. But you must remember, you do have rights, and your rights is enshrined in terms of Section 198 of the Labor Relations Act, which specifically regulates temporary employment services, as you know, as employment agencies. That's the first thing you need to remember. So remember now, when you get, if it is a dispute and you are your labor broker has placed you at this client, and this client is, there's a dispute arise from that situation, you go to the CCMA, you go to the labor department, and you open up against the agency. You have to, even though they didn't do anything wrong, but that is the process. So just remember that. I know it's a bit tricky, but that is the process of how things should be able to unfold when you have that situation. Just remember that. And then the next thing you must remember is, if you work at the client of the temporary employment agency, your conditions of service must be exactly the same as those permanent workers at, let's say, the dairy company that I was speaking about earlier on. So if those people there have medical aid and you work there, you must need, the, the agency must be able to give you medical aid as well. If there's a pension and provident fund for that company, you are supposed to get exactly the same benefits. So those are the type of things that you need to remember always when it comes to temporary employment services. On your payslip, if you they actually can't pay you less than what those people are, but you're supposed to earn exactly the same salary, even though you don't work for the client. So remember that, um, your conditions of employment can't be less favorable than, number one, what the law prescribes. As an example, leave. If you get 15 days leave, they must you must also get 15 days leave. If you get 89 rand an hour, if they get 89 rand an hour, you must get exactly the same rate of pay. So that you remember now, your conditions of employment can't be less favorable. I'm basically explaining to you what happens, what the law is saying in terms of the Labor Relations Act, in terms of Section 198, and I'm making it and explaining to you in the most simplest form. So just remember that you can't have less favorable conditions of employment. That is completely unacceptable. And then the last point that I want to bring that is that companies can't practice this thing about making people work on a temporary basis unless your company expressly is trading under temporary employment services. So let's say it's a normal company and it's not a agency. They can't do the same thing that agencies do by recycling people, making them work for a few months and then let them go and just employ somebody else. That is not that is completely prohibited in terms of Section 108. So just remember those type of things. So these are the four fundamental um, information that you need to know when you start working for an agency. And it's very common in our country. In fact, it just creates so much problems for people, and especially if you don't know your rights, especially if you don't know what is you are entitled to, then you will encounter these problems. Once you're aware and you're equipped then you will be able to exercise your rights if need be, because the law protects you against this type of relationship. It's quite complicated, but if you know the basics, like I explained, those four basic things, you should be able to be fine. Uh, Now, there's more, because there's amendments that took place in January 2015, where Section 198 capital A up until D has been introduced when it comes to fixed term contracts and furthermore temporary working. So those things I'm going to be dealing with at the later stage. But for now, I want you to just remember that what I've explained to you now, those four things that I mentioned to you, is the basics and is the bare minimum of the information that you know. I'm not going to go any further. Uh, I'm just going to stop here right now. And on the next video, I'm going to go in a little bit more in detail about the other amendments. There is case law that speaks to that. It's called assigned services. The assigned services case that went from the labor court right up until the constitutional court. I might be speaking about that case that sets out what the law says, how that relationship must be handled even further. So it gets a little bit more tricky and it gets a little bit more complicated, but I will break it down for you in a manner that you can understand. So remember, like I said to you previously, I'm going to simplify things now on the most basic level so that you can understand. And then once your interest is peaked, then we can engage. You can find me on Facebook, All Things Labor Law on Facebook. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, also called All Things Labor Law on YouTube. Like the video, give me a comment. I will reply to your comments. If you have further questions, just put the comment on the chat box, and then I will be able to respond to those. You can even send me an email, allthingslaborrelated@gmail.com, if you would like to know anything else. And you shall see me again on the next video. Remember, with me, you're going to learn. Thank you very much.